Hi, everybody. Let me get my Instagram set up and then we will get ready to go for Crushing Doubts Q&A. All right, I think we are ready on Instagram. Here we are. Now, I also need to remove this. This is in my way. Sorry, guys. Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Crushing Doubts Q&A. It's usually Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. It's been a little bit different with the holidays, and we've had some other breaks, but I am really back in the saddle again. Should be doing these Q&As most of the time on Thursdays at this time. Again, that's 6 p.m. Eastern and 3 p.m. Pacific. Let's talk about what we're doing here and what it is that I do. So I work with mind-body symptoms, as many of you know. And why do I do this? I do this because many, many years ago now, can't believe how long ago it's been, I developed back pain. And it was really quite bad and quite bad quickly. And then it didn't go away for 8 years. And when I say it didn't go away for 8 years, I mean it was there with me every single second of those 8 years. That's a long time. That's over 2,500 days of being in the same state of mind and the same physical experience. And I had no idea that I was going to get out of it. Modern medicine seemed to have no answers for me and told me so, in fact. They told me that this is just what happens, and I couldn't believe it. And you know what? I was right to not believe that. But it's interesting because they didn't seem to think so. I went to PT, and they didn't seem to have any answers for me. I tried out alternative medicine stuff. Didn't seem to do much for me at all. Chiropractic work eventually got me some relief, but it wasn't really clear why. I didn't have any clear answers, and I was really lost. So the reason I do this show is because about maybe 7.5 years in, really 8 years into the pain, I was introduced to the works of Dr. John Sarno, and I had never heard of him before. He was an MD at NYU. Of course, many of us know Dr. Sarno's work well now. And his works showed me that this was not a structural issue, that there was nothing that was going on for me that was going to keep me from getting better. And it even talked to me about how I could get better. It didn't give me all the answers, but it gave me really compelling reasons why I could get better, why I hadn't gotten better. And just the fact that it was making sense was helpful enough. But then I started asking more questions and investigating more. And when I got the answers I needed, it all clicked into place. And what happened is my thinking changed. And when my thinking changed, my whole physiology changed. And that back pain went away. Really, once it really clicked, it went away in 3 days. Now, that's not going to happen for everybody in that particular way. I wouldn't really call that entirely a book cure, but it did go away quickly when things clicked. But there's many ways to make symptoms go away. And we're here to talk about mind-body symptoms. As it turned out, those pains were from my head. They weren't in my head. They were from my head. What I was feeling, what I was thinking was all in the same loop over and over again, causing those symptoms. So we're here to talk about mind-body symptoms, where what goes on in the mind, whether your feelings or your thinking, leads to the same physiology or symptoms in the physiology. And we want to get control of those symptoms because they're very uncomfortable. So today, as always, I'm going to be answering your questions about mind-body symptoms. You do the questions, I'll do the answers, and I want you to follow up. Every answer I give, I want you to follow up if you've got more questions, because ultimately it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what you think. You're going to go away thinking the same things if I don't help you change your mind with information. Let me say hi to a couple people and then we'll dive in. It is Layla. Good to see you here. Vinings 75. Good to see you here. Carolyn Merlina, thank you for joining us. Maria Llewellyn, good to see you. Amir Nurhani, good to see you, my friend. And How to Heal Chronic Pain, that's Scotty Styles. Good to see you. Okay, Amir says, good evening. Good to see you. Susan Sereno says, hi, Dan and everyone. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to all. I'm excited about 2025 for multiple reasons. Hoping that a lot of people are going to get a lot of relief, that the movement is going to continue to expand. And in addition, my book comes out 3 weeks from today. At this exact same time is going to be the launch. So I'm going to do this event, but I will be here, and actually probably will be here with some people from the mind-body community otherwise, to talk about the book and where the movement is. And I can't wait to talk to you about that all. We got a couple more people saying hi. Karen Isaacs, good to see you, says hi. Beatrice, I can't remember if I got you or not, but you said hi. Thank you. Kasim, good to see you. Thanks for saying hi. Beatrice says, always so many questions. Yep, that's what we're here for, Beatrice. But the good news is, if I continue to answer questions to your satisfaction, there actually will be less questions and you'll feel more optimistic about getting better. So that's my goal. Now, let's get into how I'm going to answer these questions, and then we'll get to them. So the way that I answer these questions relates to how I answered my own questions about symptoms. What I found is that Dr. Sarno and a lot of the mind-body community often talk about the fact that emotions can cause physical symptoms, and they're not wrong about that. Mental process of all kinds can cause physical symptoms. So this isn't so much about where they're wrong or not, but more that I found a way to expand that information and understand it better. And when I looked at it, it came to the surface as I studied it more and more, and this continues to bear out over time, that there are actually 3 ways that mind-body symptoms happen. One is emotional life leading to symptoms. Another is your thinking, especially if you have fears or unanswered questions or you're confused. That can lead to symptoms staying the same. And then there's also your relationship with you that can lead to symptoms. So what I found is, with these 3 ways of looking at things, I started talking to people and I would have them take out a sheet of paper and divide it into what I call 3 columns. So this is the column system. It's emotions, doubt, which is the thinking, and power, which is the relationship with the self. And when I looked at this very closely and studied how it went, the emotions column didn't just describe mind-body symptoms all the time. What it really described was the onsets and upticks in symptoms. Those first times where the symptoms appeared, or when the symptoms suddenly went up, or even when they go down. When there are big adjustments in the symptoms happening right then and there, there's something going on in the emotions. And we can learn things about it, and we can learn how to control those acute symptoms. In the doubt column, we're talking about symptoms that don't really budge. They don't move much at all, or they're very, very recurrent and consistent. And what happens then is, it's not about emotions. Your emotions are changing hundreds and hundreds of times a day, probably thousands of times a day. But your thinking tends to stay the same. We have the same experience. We're going to expect the same things. So when your thinking stays the same, it can cement the symptoms in place. For seemingly chronic symptoms, we're going to look at the thinking, and we're going to reduce the doubt that holds the symptoms in place. For the emotions column, we're looking at acute onsets and upticks. And if we understand the emotions, we can get rid of those acute symptoms. If we change our thinking, we can get rid of that seemingly chronic symptoms, or what I call consistently acute. They're always there, but they can be made to go away at any point if we change our thinking. And lastly, the power column. This is about your relationship with yourself. The way we understand power column symptoms isn't acute onsets and upticks. It's not the ongoing or seemingly chronic symptoms. It's these low-level plateaus that really only come out when you've gotten better some from mind-body work. Once that does happen, though, a lot of times people can run into plateaus and feel like I was getting better, but now I'm getting stuck. That's usually about something in the relationship with the self. Now I'll say one last thing about the columns, and then we're going to get right into the questions. Each column also has a different function as the way the symptoms are operating. In the emotions column, the symptoms are functioning to distract. There's an unconscious emotional experience we do not want to know about, and the symptom distracts so that we won't find out if we don't look past the symptom. Boom, the symptom's there, and we're not thinking emotionally. We're thinking physically. That's the psychological defense of the emotions column. The psychological defense of the doubt column is protection. It's the brain thinks we're in danger, and what we have to do to get that to relent is to convince it fully, with full belief, that we're not in danger. Then the protection function goes away, and those symptoms can start to break up. In the power column, the symptom function is not distraction like in emotions, and it's not protection like in doubt. It's communication. And by the way, this isn't even a psychological defense. This is the part of us that really wants to know who we are and what we need, and wants us to align with ourselves. And so power column work is about figuring out, who are you and what do you need and how can you align with yourself? When we do these things, when we receive the communication in power, when we get rid of the distraction in the emotions column, or when we convince ourselves we do not need to protect ourselves, we take away the symptom function, and then the symptom goes away. And I know that can sound like a lot, but if you think about it, there's only 3 columns. There's only 3 functions. If we learn very well how to take these away, we can knock out symptoms all over the place, and that is the goal. Okay, I'm gonna get into some questions, then at some point I'll talk about how my website works, what resources are available on there, how I can help you. This is one way I can help you, though, is just answering your questions, which can change the trajectory of your thinking. Okay, I want to make sure I didn't miss anybody. And by the way, if I do miss a question or didn't say hello, please do let me know. Okay, go the distance 24/7. I like that name. It's inspiring. Good to see you here, Luann Davidson. Good to see you here as well. Sarah Kelly Burke, good to see you. And I know you're here from the UK. So you're up late, and I appreciate you staying up late. I will work to get you answers to your questions. Okay. Vining75 says, please share tips about recovering from neuropathic pain. So I'm going to do that. But actually, what I think you're going to find is that I'm going to provide a lot of different tips about this healing in general. But I want to ask you a question about that, Vinings, because you said neuropathic pain. And one of the terms that I use is something called neuroplastic pain. It sounds pretty similar, but there is a difference. Neuroplastic pain is about how the brain can change and how if we can harness that change, we can get rid of pain and other symptoms. Neuropathic pain is pain that is generated within the nerve structure. And we may be speaking the same language, by the way, with just different words. So I just want to make sure that you, oh, no, you actually changed it to neuroplastic pain in your next one. So that's actually important because it's a word that people often mistake for each other. Let's just go with neuroplastic pain. That's the easiest way. Neuropathic pain tends to be things that can be really related to the nerves that are more medical. But neuroplastic pain is this mind-body space. So I will share tips on dealing with neuroplastic pain Vinings. But the first thing I'm going to say is listen to what I've said so far about these columns, because the main tip that I can give you is when it all makes sense to you, your mind is going to change and then the symptoms are going to change. And so how do we make sense of things? Well, there's lots of different ways, but my way is to have this system where there's 3 different areas. So you can look at any symptom situation, any moment, and figure out what is happening in the mind-body process right now. And that orients us to what to do. So the tips are going to be around these columns. But Vinings, let me know if that makes sense to you. Okay? Scotty Styles says, excited for the book launch. It's marked in my calendar. Can't wait to have you here for it, Scotty. And I hope you will spread the word if you don't mind. The more people we have at this event, the better for multiple reasons. But included in that is the more people who purchase the book on that first day and in that first couple of days, the more likely it becomes an Amazon bestseller. Obviously, that's nice for me, but that's actually not the main reason I'm doing it. The main reason I want to do that is because when books like mine get notice, the rest of society starts to take notice. Nicole Sachs has a book coming out in early February. It so happens that our books ended up coming out at similar times. It wasn't meant to be that. Oh, I guess it was meant to be that way, but I didn't plan it to be that way. And yet, this is good for the mind-body community that there's attention on this. And Nicole's a little ahead of me in terms of her marketing. And this is because this is her second book and she's going on the Today Show and things like that. I will eventually be doing that as well. That's the hope, because we want all of us to be getting as much attention as possible so that people can really understand what's happening here. Vinings, I see you did mean neuroplastics. I'm just glad we synced up about that. I used to make that mistake myself. Rita LaBarbera is here, another great coach along with Scotty Styles in the mind-body community. There's tons of great coaches out there, therapists, doctors, physical therapists, really all these different fields coming together and understanding how mind-body experience works and why it's so important. Angels Earthbound, thanks for joining us here. And Throttle Torque, thank you for joining us here as well. All right, let me see if there's other questions that I missed on Instagram. Not yet. I do see some. Sarah, I'll get to your question in a second. And let me see. Did Amir ask a question? Not yet. Okay, but do let me know if you have questions. Sarah, I'll be with you in a second. I'm going to jump over to my YouTube questions because I'm falling behind there. Okay, Russell Crane's Music, thanks for joining us here. Russell says, hey, Dan, I'm going currently traveling and am dealing with a huge number of very intense TMS symptoms. So first of all, I'm sorry you're suffering, and we'll get into how to resolve this. TMS, by the way, is tension myositis syndrome. That is what Dr. Sarno called the mind-body process, essentially. It was originally named in relation to back pain, about tense muscles. And in the mind-body community, you're going to hear lots of terms thrown around that really all mean the same thing. TMS, mind-body syndrome, neuroplastic symptoms, PPD, psychophysiological disorder. I don't like disorder or syndrome. And the reason I don't like it is because this is actually the human condition. What isn't normal in that human condition is when these symptoms get stuck. But if we didn't have doubt, they wouldn't. So it's normal to have doubt, but when it goes so far, we need to, work against it. Now, Russell's having symptoms. He says headaches, nausea, muscle pain, anxiety, fatigue, etc. I'm sorry, Russell. It does not sound fun, but we're going to work on it. My life is in the midst of many changes personally and professionally. I'm not sure how to combat the severe symptoms. Okay. Let me just see if you had more follow-up to that, Russell. Not yet. Okay. So, let's get back to this. So, Russell, let's talk about this. When I'm thinking about how to answer anyone's question or how to get them relief in any way, I go back to the columns. What do they tell us? So, the first thing that I'm being told about this as I think about what are the symptoms saying is that this is an emotions column experience. It's an onset. You weren't having this before. Russell and I now go way back, actually. And one of the main things we worked on is doubt. And that's the way the system works. Bring down doubt, then learn about emotions, and then enter into power. And Russell, you've done this. We've been doing that work. And I think largely we're a long way along on that. Your doubt's pretty low in general, maybe not at this moment. Because remember, we're all moment-to-moment beings, and it changes based on what's happening. You've learned a lot about your emotional life. You've entered into power a lot. But everybody's going to have bad moments at times. And they're going to have them for one of three reasons, each of the columns. So sometimes you're going to have an emotions column flare-up. Sometimes you're going to have your doubt go up, and the symptoms will kind of feel like they're stuck. Sometimes you're going to have a power dilemma going on where you need to figure out how to adjust things. This, to me, though, Russell, because of the way it's presenting as an onset and its severity, speaks to emotions column symptoms. The most severe symptoms that I've seen tend to be emotions column symptoms, actually. When you're having a big, big, big emotion, that can lead to some major turmoil inside. And so the severity of symptoms, to me, sometimes people actually say to me, but it's so severe it can't be mind-body. It's actually the opposite. The more severe the symptoms are, the more likely it is to be mind-body. I've never had more pain than my mind-body symptoms. So that's one. But this is looking like an emotions column thing. And you said, my life is in the midst of many changes personally and professionally. I'm not sure how to combat the severe symptoms. Let's look in the emotions column, Russell, and let's look at the specifics. It's not just enough to say, okay, I'm upset. It's not even enough to say I'm angry or I'm sad. We need to get at the specifics. So here's my question to you, Russell. I want you to think about what the changes are. I want you to think about what they're making you feel. Now, I'm sure you've already done that some, but a lot of times the work that I do here in the Q&A and in my groups, which I'll talk about in a second, it's about the give and take because I know how to get the information. I know how to hear the information you're saying and translate what it means. But I need you guys to know that information. So let's say I was Russell was in my group. The groups are great. They're like this, except there's a lot more give and take very, very quickly. So we can get even further faster. And by the way, if you're wondering about this, you can check this out on my website, www.crushingdoubt.com. The groups are there. My teaching seminars are there, which teach all about mind-body experience and set you up well for the group. But what we would be doing there, Russell, whether there or here, is to look at the specifics. So I want some follow-up here. I want you to tell me what's going on in your life and how's it making you feel. And as simple as that may sound, that exercise is designed to get at the specifics. Because I know this is emotions column, and you know what a lot of the emotions are, but you don't know them as clearly as you need to. And we also have to make sure that no doubt is creeping in. This is emotions column 100%. But if the emotions column gets you worried, fear is a form, it's the emotional form of doubt. And then doubt starts to pile on top. So your job is bring down the doubt and look at the emotions column again, and let's get specific. Russell, let me know if that makes sense to you. Okay? All right. Teresa says, hi, Dan and Crushing Doubt community. Teresa, good to see you here. All right. Karen Isaac says, I heard Dr. Clark say part of healing is to know I'm a warrior for how I got through my childhood. I'm starting to think of myself as my own hero. Karen, that's fantastic. And I so agree with Dr. Clark about that. Dave Clark, he's a fantastic guy and he's a fantastic mind body doctor. He's actually going to be joining me on the book launch. He'll be here that night. And he's the head of the ATNS, which used to be the PPDA. The ATNS is the Association for the Treatment of Neuroplastic Symptoms. And I'm on the board there. Dr. Clark is fantastic. And what he's actually getting at is that people who have really a lot of mind body symptoms, which is going to be everybody who's here, they usually have had to fight through a lot of stuff that began in childhood. In fact, for those of you who don't know, there's something called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, which amazingly is now 25 years old. It was done in 1999, may have been 98 even, so it might be even older. But what it showed is that when people have adverse childhood experiences, which was like abuse of any type in the home, loss of a parent, any major traumas that went on in the household, they have a list of them. They were more likely to have all kinds of conditions, and that included things like cancer, heart disease, diabetes. I mean, we're talking serious stuff. And so whether you have big autoimmune things that eventually came from that, which that only happens when you're not processing deep emotional trauma. So most of you will be safe from that just by doing the processing, which is great. But even when it doesn't get to the autoimmune stage and we're having all of these symptoms, like me as well, we had to get through a childhood and we had to fight through it. And Karen, I know your story. And you say, I'm starting to think of yourself as your own hero. You were already a hero in my book right from the start. When I heard about what went on for you, my heart broke for you in the things that happened to you, but you're doing so great and you're thriving. And that's really, really exciting. So that's part of that journey. I like what Dr. Clark said there, and thank you for sharing. Okay, Susan said, Dan, please address having a doctor give someone a diagnosis that matches your symptoms and images showing what the doctor said. I believe my symptoms are TMS. Again, that's mind-body issues. But as you know from group, sometimes I have doubt. Okay. And I see you said from our group. Sorry, no problem. Okay. So let's talk about this. We know that doubt is the problem, or at least I'm telling you this, and you can think about it, and hopefully we'll come to agree with that in time. But doubt is the main thing that makes symptoms persist. When a doctor gives you a diagnosis and it really matches your symptoms, people can freak out and they can think, oh my God, they're right. That's what it is. I don't have anything. I don't have a mind-body issue. I have this issue, right? And they can really freak out because the symptoms and the diagnosis match. Here's the good news, Susan. Symptoms and diagnoses match all the time, and here's why. Because people make up these diagnoses based on a collection of symptoms that typically happen. It's not the other way around. It's not that there's this big, scary disease in the background, and then you get it, and that's what the symptoms are. It's the opposite. The diagnoses come from a collection of symptoms that the doctors then describe in that way. Fibromyalgia is a great example. What is fibromyalgia? It's really just a collection of a bunch of pains jumping around the body. And they talk about it like it's fibromyalgia. But what is that really? It's just a word to describe a symptom process that many people have that is mind-body. And because they don't call it mind-body in the first place, they label it with a diagnosis. Then what happens is these diagnoses take on a life of their own. There's tons of diagnoses out there, so many. There's so many, in fact, that we have things like stiff person syndrome. For those of you who hadn't heard, Celine Dion supposedly has stiff person syndrome. What she really has, and I'm not saying this mockingly at all, I have a lot of empathy for her, and I would like her to get help from this. What she really has is severe mind-body issues. And that's what all of these things are. Long COVID is another one of those things. People have these things that get labeled and they do fit with the symptoms. But why? Because we named the diagnosis for the symptoms, not the other way around. But then the patient hears it in reverse. They hear the diagnosis and how it matches the symptoms. That's like coloring a picture red and then saying, I don't know why this picture is red, because we colored it red, right? And so, Susan, I want to know, how does that work for you in terms of addressing this doubt? Because what I'm telling you is, of course, it matches the symptoms. That's what the diagnosis was designed to do. We're human beings. We have similar symptom patterns. Diagnoses are just descriptions of that. Let me know what you think of that, Susan. I'm interested in what everybody has to say about that. Okay, Shelby Geyer, thanks for joining us here. Felipe, good to see you. Daniel Starkey, it's been a while. Good to see you here. Mary Sue CM, good to see you here. I Love Mind Body Work has joined us as well. Thank you. Cookie Nat, good to see you as well. All right. Jumping back, Sarah Kelly Burke says, I have a few questions. 1, what do you make of the symptom imperative? 2, what do you do with the core narrative? 3, when the heck is your book coming? Okay. So I'm going to answer those 3 questions totally separately because I want to keep it organized for the listeners. 1, what do you make of the symptom imperative? The symptom imperative is what Dr. Sarno, that was the name he chose to describe what happens when you recognize a symptom as mind-body, and then that symptom that you recognize dies down and then another pops up. That's what the symptom imperative is. So when Sarah's asking, what do you make of the symptom imperative? What I would say is this. From a columns perspective, Sarah, what I make of it is that you're bringing down doubt about one symptom and it disables it, just as I would anticipate that doubt column work would do. And then another symptom pops up because you haven't fully solved the problem, either because there is an emotional experience leading to upticks and requiring deeper protection, which protection is what happens in the doubt column, or because you've just got broader doubts. And that's actually usually more going to be the case with the symptom imperative. So doubt still has room to play. It says, fine, I can't fool you about this shoulder problem, but I can get you in your knee, or I can get you with IBS. And doubt is always looking for a foothold, sometimes in your actual feet, where it can continue to do its work. So what do I make of the symptom imperative? I make of it that doubt wants to have different footholds in your body. It wants to establish these outposts where it can cause problems and continue to protect because it thinks you're in danger. And it's going to keep doing that until we deal with the overall system of doubt and recognize we're not in danger. That's the important part. Okay, that's 1, Sarah. Follow up as needed. 2, what do you do with the core narrative? The core narrative is something you do in the power column. Each column has a couple of tasks. I kept it simple for multiple reasons, but including it actually is simple. There's not that much that needs to be done. But in the power column, there's 2 tasks. One is to develop the core narrative, and the other is to assess and adjust for power. Assessing and adjusting for power is just paying attention to the moment and seeing, am I in power? Am I out of power? How am I feeling? And then making an adjustment that works to align with yourself. But before we do any of that, usually, I recommend doing a core narrative. What that is the story of how you've suffered. We each have many stories of our lives, many parts of ourselves, but we're not looking to tell the story of how we felt good our whole lives in this case, because we're trying to get somewhere new with ourselves about our suffering. So if we tell a story that's an accurate one with the core narrative about how we've suffered. Sarah, you're asking, what do you do with the core narrative? The ironic thing is the thing that the core narrative does tends to take place just by doing it. So the creation of the core narrative, the process of it, gives you new information about your relationship with you. It opens doors that I've never seen anything do. I mean, I had 20 years of therapy. Nothing worked for me until, no, I shouldn't say nothing worked until, nothing worked for me at that level that core narrative work ended up helping. And I hadn't created the core narrative. I stumbled upon it by experience. But when I described what I did, it was essentially creating a core narrative, which is I came to understand myself through telling this story. My powers of self-empathy went way, way up. And I learned things about me. I learned what I needed. And so the real question when you say, what do you do with the core narrative, is you're going to use your new understanding and your new self empathy to live life differently. You're going to look at every situation and think, okay, given what I know and given what I need, what am I going to do in this situation? Now, Sarah, I don't know if I answered your question well enough to your satisfaction, but follow up as needed. Okay, we'll start there. 3, when the heck is my book coming? January 30th, 3 weeks from today. I'm checking with the publishers to make sure they are on time because they have been slow. I have no indication that it's not going to be there. We're planning on it January 30th. That's not far away, which is pretty amazing for me, and I'm very excited about it and glad that a lot of other people are excited too. Rita, thanks for saying hi if I didn't respond to that before. Okay, Amir says emotions, onset and uptick of symptoms, doubt, recurrent and persistent symptoms, mindset and thinking remains the same and keeps the symptoms, and power, relation with yourself, low level plateau. Amir, you nailed it. That's exactly how to think of these columns. And the more we think about it this way, the more we look at each situation through this lens, the more easily we can see what's going on. And then that dictates what needs to happen from there. Okay. Thanks for organizing that, Amir. I know you're organizing it for yourself, but that helps with everybody. So thank you. Okay, Rita says stiff man used to be called catalepsy in Victorian times. Nothing is new. Diagnoses are discovered and forgotten and repackaged. I completely agree with that. Over and over and over again. But then they change the name as if it's somehow more scientific, when really they're just missing the boat on the main picture, which is the mind and body are one, and there's a whole lot of stuff happening in our bodies that is happening because of the mind. Ricky Barons, good to see you. And by the way, when I say in the mind, I don't mean you're making it up. I mean, it comes from the mind and becomes very real in the body in all sorts of ways. Love Heals says, any advice on how to navigate excessive fatigue due to being on medication where fatigue seems extreme? Let me just make sure you didn't say anything more about that. Okay. So here's what I'd say about that. Again, whenever I answer anybody, I want you to follow up as needed, but even follow up on other people's questions. Like if I answer Love Heal's question here and you have questions about it, pop another question in, because ultimately you've got to get your questions answered. So here's what I'd say. You use the word excessive fatigue, and then you noted you're on medication, but the fatigue seems extreme. And this is not atypical, actually. A lot of times when people are experiencing fatigue, they're finding it seems out of whack, seems like too much. So the way that I would think about this is that let's go back to the column system and the flow of how the columns work. When there's doubt, I often say, when in doubt, work with doubt. And so doubt is the first step. We're going to work to bring down doubt. So we have to bring down doubt about your fatigue symptoms. In some ways, I think you're asking the question, is this mind body? Or maybe you're saying, no, I already know it's mind body, but how do I deal with it? But either way, you've got doubts as to whether you can get it to go away, or is it excessive? Is it related to the medication? Is it not? Remember, questions are a form of doubt. The forms of doubt are fear, confusion, lack of certainty, and questions. And ultimately, the best doubts are questions because you can get them answered. Fear, we've got to reduce. It's too much. We can't even think. Confusion, we've got to get people to really understand and feel hopeful that they can understand. When we've got a lack of certainty, well, we got to work towards certainty, but the way to do that is ask the questions and get the answers. So Love Heals. What I'm thinking about this is that most of the time when people are having symptoms related to medication, especially where it seems extreme or out of whack, it is a mind-body response. What's happening there? This is something I call a doubt trigger. A doubt trigger is where something very plausible in the environment convinces people that they would naturally have a symptom from it. Now, it can happen from shoveling snow and then thinking you've got a shoulder thing, or playing basketball and then your feet hurt, or taking medication where there could be side effects. You know those commercials where they say side effects may include? In some ways, that drives me crazy. I understand they need to say that, or that's probably coming from like a legal standpoint. But one of the problems with that is they're almost suggesting. It's the power of suggestion. They're suggesting symptoms that you might have. And then people are more likely to have them. Now, there are times where I think medications are prone to causing actual side effects that you need to know about. But I think it's very, very understated how much of the time there can be a mind-body experience driving that. So what I would encourage you to do first, Love Heals, is to challenge the doubt about this, that the fatigue is not caused by the medication in all likelihood. The vast majority of it's going to be mind-body. If you can do that, then you can disable what I'm calling this doubt trigger. You're challenging it. And what I think you will find if you challenge it successfully is it's actually just going to go away, because that's all it is. It's just doubt. And if you challenge it, it'll go away. Now, if it's coming up in a way where you're not really having it all the time, but you have it sometimes, sudden onsets and upticks, well, then I'd look at emotions. Then I'd wonder, is there something going on? But you're not going to be able to understand the emotions column experience very much if doubt is really in there. So the first step is bring down the doubt. Secondly, then I'd look at, is there an emotional experience that's leading to any onsets and upticks? But if it's just always there, that's a doubt trigger. And I want you to challenge it. I've had doubt triggers in relation to medication, especially when tapering off of medication and worrying about rebound effects and things like that. It can cause all kinds of symptoms. Why? Because if your brain's expecting it, it can already generate it, and it often does. So the main piece of advice I can give you on this is challenge the doubt. This is very much a mind-body experience. I can help you conquer it. Now, speaking of that, well, let me say hi to a couple more people. Journeys, thanks for joining us here. Kari Marie Young, thank you for joining us. And Sonoma Alina, thank you for joining us here. Let me talk a little bit about what's on the website, because when it comes to challenging doubt triggers, or when it comes to discovering emotional themes and the emotion that is causing emotions column symptoms, or when it comes to challenging doubt, or when it comes to getting to your power, I work directly with all of these things. But partly because of the demand and how many people are suffering out there, I've built systems that can accommodate more people. And so a huge part of that is my seminars and groups. So when you go on the website, which is www.crushingdoubt.com or .org, you're going to find many different resources, but two of the main resources that can really help you. And by the way, these can help you like in the middle of the night. If you're watching this and you're like, I want to get going. Well, one is my teaching seminars. These are 8 75-minute sessions. And what are they all about? They talk about the entire mind-body experience so that you can finally make sense of, why does one person say journal? Why does one person say don't pay attention to the symptoms? Why does one person say retrain the brain? They're all right some of the time, but no one's right all of the time. I find the column system is the best version of that, because it brings all that good information and explains why it works in some people and not others, or at certain times and not others, or in certain situations and not others. So the teaching seminar does a great job teaching all about that. It also does a great job against doubt in general. I present the whole mind-body argument and how preposterous it is that people don't see this in society, because it's so obvious. And when you see it from so many different sources all at once, it becomes even more compelling that, yep, this is right. And your doubt tends to come down from watching those seminars. Lastly, I talk about the columns. I talk about them in greater detail than you're getting here, greater detail than you'll get anywhere else other than my book. And my book, it's a different form of getting that detail. Some people want to get it through the videos, and you'll get the information faster through those seminars, generally speaking, unless you're a really fast reader. There's also some question and answers at the end that follow on what we talk about in the seminar. So they're very valuable pieces of information that you can get fast. When I created those seminars, I did feel proud and happy with them, but then I found people need help sometimes implementing the system, and they need it from me on a regular basis. So that's why I created my groups. The groups are Zoom calls where there is a Q&A, but it's very different than here. They're not recorded. The people get to know each other. There's support there. But the main thing that's different is that the back and forth that happens gets us so much further in one sitting with each person. And you're watching it happen with other people. So the amount that you learn in those groups is even better than here. It's more honed. It's more related back to the column system over and over again. And so these are resources to check out, ways that I can help you. And I'm In groups, I'm available once, twice, or 3 times a week, depending on the package you get, because I wanted people to have a lot of access to me. Why? Well, primarily because when I was getting better, there were so many things that I wanted. And what I'm doing is I'm building those. The book that explains even more than what's in Dr. Sarno, the groups, the seminar, this Q&A. It's all stuff that I wish that had been there. And so hopefully it's going to be helping a lot of people. Okay, Monica Liacetti, thank you for joining us here. Oregon Pain Education Toolkit, thank you for joining us here as well. Okay, Anush. Anush says, hi, Dan. Going through seminar videos, speaking of the seminar. Question, if we go on analyzing moments, isn't it tiring? And I have fear that healing might lead to some drastic relation changes. Okay, so there's 2 different questions embedded in here. I'm going to answer them separately just for clarity. Let's start with the first one. Question, if we go on analyzing moments, isn't it tiring? So yes, that could be tiring, but the way the columns are, the way they work, the way they're designed, is to actually make it so that this just becomes a second nature way of thinking, not something where you have to analyze so much, not something where you have to work so much. And I've heard this from many people before. They say, oh, when I started off your work, I was like, oh my God, there's all this work to be done. There isn't. There's 3 columns. There's very clear and pretty limited tasks in terms of number, though they're very powerful tasks. And they really help you analyze the moments more quickly. So if you're getting tired from analyzing the moments, what it means is we haven't gotten to our most efficient way of using the columns. They're not integrated yet. When they get integrated, Anush, it won't be tiring. In fact, it'll be the opposite. What it will do is it'll allow you to understand the moments so quickly and so well that you'll have energy to do everything else. They actually take burden off of you. But at the beginning, it can feel like, oh my God, this is going to be tiring. And I just want to encourage everybody that what happens is as you learn it and it becomes second nature, it's really, really easy. And it actually makes everything easier. So Anush, let's see what you think of that answer. Now the second question. And I have fear that healing might lead to some drastic relation changes. So Anush, this question or comment relates to the power column. In the power column, we actually do change pretty dramatically when we understand our core narrative, when we understand what happened to us. It's similar to what Karen was saying. We become the hero of our own story and we really believe it. But that also changes a lot about how we feel about the people who are in the story, about other people, about the people we want to be friends with. And there are some potentially drastic relation changes. But first of all, good news. You get to decide. You don't have to do anything. You could find that they aren't as drastic changes as you think. In fact, a lot of these changes can be things that just happen inside that the other person doesn't even know about. And you don't have to get away from those relationships inherently. It doesn't have to be drastic. However, I want to acknowledge, I understand your fear because there are times where once we know something, it's hard to put the genie back in the bottle. However, I will tell you this, Anush, when that's the case, you're going to be glad about those relation changes. It could be hard, but the ones that are going to have to change, you're going to be glad that you changed. And ultimately, I think it's more important that you have a good relationship with you and give yourself the chance to think about how you want to live. So let's follow up on that. But in my experience, and it's pretty vast, I didn't have things that I regretted changing, and neither of any of the people I've worked with. If anything, they usually say they regret that they didn't make the changes faster. So I think if we can trust our symptoms and trust our bodies and trust ourselves, we're always moving in the direction we need to. Okay, let's see what you think about that, Anush. Rude Master 27, Rudy, good to see you here. He says, hello, Pain Detective. That's his nickname for me, which I confess I love. Growing up, Sherlock Holmes was one of my early heroes. I loved how he thought about things logically and thought, if this is happening, then they must mean this. And that is kind of, I thought maybe I'd be a detective, and it turns out I am. But I am a pain detective and a symptom detective. So thanks for that, Rudy. Okay, Beatrice says, I keep asking myself who I am anymore because I feel powerless against doubt when I was able to overcome when younger. There's a follow-up here. Also, I actually do have a neuropathic pain in feet, but it's not found on testing. So idiopathic, which means like not really known what the source is, but apparently much of neuropathy doesn't help me much in the arena of doubt. So what you're saying, Beatrice, is that I would actually call this neuroplastic pain more than neuropathic pain, because neuropathic pain usually isn't idiopathic, as far as I understand it. It's nerve pain, like from very clear damage, like when a bullet is lodged in a certain place and you have nerves firing from that. And you know what? Even that can have a neuroplastic element. But here's what I'll say. It's not found on testing and it's idiopathic. That all speaks to the fact that this is mind body. Now, you say it doesn't help you much in the arena of doubt. Not yet, but when all the facts continue to align, why isn't it found on testing? Why is it idiopathic? Why do they not know? Usually when doctors don't know, we're starting to move in the direction of mind body. But it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what you think. Now, that being said, let me jump back to your first comment. I keep asking myself who I am anymore because I feel powerless against doubt when I was able to overcome one younger. I know this may surprise some people, but including you, Beatrice, but when I hear this, what I think is this is exactly what doubt is like. Doubt convinces us we're not the same anymore. We can't do this. Everything's changed. Doubt is like the ultimate pessimist. In fact, if you think of what is depression, I'm not saying you're depressed, Beatrice, though there may be some of that, and that would be natural with the symptoms that you're having. But depression is a belief that things can't get better. And what is that? That's doubt. Anxiety is a fear about what's happening and that it's not going to change and it's not going to be okay. What is that? That's doubt. All of these symptoms are doubt. And so the reason I'm saying this to you, Beatrice, is if you read what you just wrote here, I keep asking myself who I am anymore because I feel powerless against doubt when I was able to overcome one younger. This is a doubt right here. You are telling yourself, I was able to do this before and I can't do it now, which means I'm weaker now. I'm in a worse position. I'm not going to be able to do it. Doubt starts to spin, and doubt's telling you a story. Now, in the doubt column, there are three things that you're going to do: observe, articulate, and counter. Observing a doubt means to call it into question. Instead of saying, oh, that sounds really bad and I believe it's true, call it into question and ask yourself, maybe this isn't true. Maybe this is just a really bad line of thinking that's twisting things around on me. And we want to help you observe it. Beatrice, that's where we're at with you. It's observe, articulate, and counter. Observe is to call it into question. Articulate is to put it into words so you can see what you're thinking. You already articulated it here, but you need to back up and observe it because you articulated it, but guess what? You think it's true. You think you actually are powerless. You think you were better when you were younger and that you were able to overcome these things and you're now not able to, or that you're weaker now. That's not true. What is different between now and then is you have more doubt now. That's the only difference. And if we can dial that back and get you back to the kind of confidence you had before, then you'll be exactly where you were. The only difference is doubt. This is not about aging. This is not about you being powerless. This is not about you can't do it. This is about you're having high levels of doubt and you're buying into it. I'm not criticizing you for that. That happens all the time, but that's our job. Observe it. Let's call this into question. Beatrice, let me see what you think about that. Susan said, Dan, I'm sure you know that Scotty Stiles is an excellent mind-body practitioner and he speaks highly of you. Thank you, Susan. Yes, I do know that Scotty is a mind-body coach and he's really great at what he does. I love his posts and I feel like we go way back now, Scotty, but we still haven't met in person. I'm looking for that to happen at some point, or to have you on the podcast. Do let me know. I'd love to do that. Okay, and Susan said, yes, Rita is another excellent mind-body practitioner, and she also speaks highly of you. Thanks, Susan. Rita actually has also done my training in the columns, and which is helpful to me because I have enough people coming to me that I really need to have referrals that I can give so that there's more people who can work in this way, and Rita's fantastic with that. Totally agree. Jamie, thanks for joining us here. Good to see you. Rudy then says, you're the ST of your kind. Let's see. What does that mean? Like the Pinkerton detectives from back in the West days. Well, it sounds extremely glowing in compliments, and I appreciate it, Rudy. But if there was a typo or if I misunderstood something, let me know. Thanks for the hearts, Rita. Same to you. Okay. Oh, interesting. Teresa said Dan Buglio's book just came out. I didn't actually know that. So Dan Buglio is another great guy in the field. He talks about getting attention off the symptoms. And, in my experience in the mind body field, all of these people, they're great people. They have great ideas. It fits with a portion of what needs to go on. And what I like to do is take the best of that information and bring it into one system to show you when do you use which, so that it's not so confusing and you don't feel, well, I'm going to try this and I'm going to try that, but I don't know which to do when. I see first. You're the first of your kind. There was a missing one. I see. Like the Pinkerton detectives from back in the West States. Well, thank you. That's a great honor, Rudy. Thank you for saying that. But I'll be interested to check out Dan's book. I met Dan in person. I went on his podcast. He came on mine, but then I met him at the PPDA, which is now the ATNS conference, and it was this weird. It was a reunion of people who all knew each other well, but had never met in person. So I'll have to check that out. That's great. And guys, let me know what you think about these different books. Okay. Hillel, good to see you here. He says, hi, Dan. 1, can onsets and upticks also be low, mid-level pain and not only severe pain? Yes. Okay, so there's no hard and fast rule about the severity of symptoms. You can have a mild symptom or a severe symptom in any of the columns. Severity speaks to the level of the severeness of the feeling or the thought or the experience. But severity, there's no hard and fast rule. So yeah, you can have onsets and upticks that are very low. In fact, in my family, we have a joke. It's not even a joke. It's actually just the way we think about things. When any of us sneeze, we ask what bothered them, because our sneezes happen usually, if you think about it, pay attention. When you sneeze, pay attention to, was there something irritating happening at that moment? And I think if you really think about it, you're going to find that there was. And a lot of times it's as small as, oh my God, I made a bad move in that chess game. Or, oh, I forgot to do something and I don't want to do it. Now, I will say this, the severity of the pain or symptom does tend to relate to the severity of the internal experience. So if you're having a severe emotional experience, you're having a severe emotional experience underneath. If you're just sneezing, you're having a mild one. When it comes to doubt, if you're having really strong doubts and you're really afraid, the pain or symptom is going to be at a higher level. When you're just a little bit worried about it, it's going to tend to be lower. So the severity relates to the feeling underneath. In the power column, you could have a severe plateau of sorts. It's not typical though, because severity does tend to come from doubt and emotions more than in power. So you will find that there's not as high level pain in the power column, except there's one exception to that. So actually, I'll say it this way. In every column, you can have severe stuff and you can have mild stuff. And there's a way to understand that severity in either place. In the power column, severity tends to relate to that you're not only understanding painful things, you're receiving the communication and it's really painful, but usually it's when you're in the middle of dealing with it. So for some people, Jamie, I'm actually thinking of you because, your symptoms have gone up while processing power. And that can sometimes happen, especially when you're living it. You're making big changes. There can be a period where it gets more severe. So again, Hillel, the main thing to say for you and for everybody else wondering about this, you can have low or mid-level or severe pain or other symptoms in all 3 columns, but it's just more information that tells us about what's happening. Okay, then 2. Is only recognizing the specific emotion/power message enough to finish the onset uptick, or in complex pain syndromes, there need to be power work process to finish an onset uptick in real time? Okay, that's a great question. Here's what I would say. Typically speaking, in the emotions column, it's usually enough to finish off the onset or uptick to just become aware of it. I often say that the emotions and power column are both emotional columns. But in the emotions column, we're going to use the emotional experience to just become aware, to connect to it so that unconscious experience is now conscious. And that usually can just finish off the onset or uptick. So if that doesn't, and there's an emotional experience, it's usually pointing in the direction of a power column experience where you need to receive the message. There's something deeper. So if doubt is down, and then you're dealing with an emotional experience, and you don't get rid of that onset or uptick, one of two things is happening. Either you haven't hit on the specific emotion, you think you have, but you're not right, and you need to keep looking. Or if you're certain that's the right emotion, but you're really hurting and it's connecting to your broad power column experience, then there's power column work that needs to be done there. Okay, Hillel, let me know if that made sense. Okay, Jamie says, thank you, Dan, but the best thing you have taught me that they will not hurt me, and most important, they will not last. Talking about high symptoms, 100%. But I also like, Jamie, that, it's one thing for me to say, it's going to be okay. You're going to be fine, and mean it. It's another for me to tell you why. And that's what I'm telling you. There's a why to this. You're in the middle of changing the biggest things in your entire life. Of course, your symptoms will be higher now. So not only are they not going to hurt you, and not only are they not going to last, but there's a reason that they're not going to last, because you are going through something that's going to change what you're experiencing. Okay. Russell Crane's music says, I definitely feel like this is an emotions column experience. I know I'm not sick or that there's anything medically wrong. So totally agreed with you on that, Russell. But now the key is, let's discover the specifics. And here he's going to get specific. To be very specific, I'm trying to leave my life as an established professional musician to live in Argentina. Basically, I'm considering to leave my home, my financial stability, and my mom is sick. Okay, you sure have a lot going on, a lot. So here is a case, Russell, where I would say, yes, this is an emotions column onset or uptick. However, this fits with Hillel's question, because what this is telling me is you are in the process, like what I was just saying with Jamie, who just thanked me for the clarification. Thank you, Jamie. You're in the middle of making a power column adjustment. And that means that this is an emotions column onset or uptick, but it's also happening in the context of a power adjustment. And what I want to encourage you is to think about your power column experience. Now that you've identified, well, two things. One, let's get even more specific in the emotions column. What do you feel about maybe leaving your home? What do you feel about leaving being a musician? What do you feel about leaving financial stability? What do you feel about your mom being sick? Of course, you don't like any of those things, but you have specific feelings. So let's get specific, because that could get you relief from that onset and an uptick. And then we would slide over to the power column and ask questions about, what does this mean about you globally? And are these moves that align with yourself better? Or are they not? Because sometimes people can start to feel really sick and not good because they're actually making moves that get them out of alignment with themselves. And other times they can feel sick and in pain and all kinds of other things because they are aligning with themselves, but they're afraid of what that will be. And so let's just keep getting more specific about it. This is another example, Russell. I'm not pushing anything on anybody, but this is another example where if we were in group, we could get even further and we could keep working on it. And like in the span of a couple weeks or maybe even less, we'd get at the specifics and I'd be able to have recommendations about what to do. Okay. Hillel had a follow-up. He said, I'm asking because I find it very discouraging to think the last option. I'm smiling a little bit, Hillel, and I mean this is a good thing. I'm smiling because every time the answer seems to be power column, you get worried. You get discouraged. And I understand that. But the good news is there's nothing inherent to be discouraged about in there. You're just feeling that's where your biggest doubts are. These are what I call level 3 doubts. Level 1 doubts are, is it mind, body, or not? Level 2 doubts is, I know it's mind, body, but maybe my mind, body symptom is harder to conquer. And level 3 doubts is, can I do it? You get discouraged every time it's about you. Every time you think, uh-oh, this is about my power. You think you can't do it. By the way, this is changing. It's getting better. But when you said, I find it discouraging to think the last option, I hope you will take it as good news, actually, that I was like, I know. That's exactly what I hear from you all the time. And there's a reason for it. But that doesn't mean it's true. It's a doubt. It's a doubt that you're taking is true. Now, let me continue with what you're saying. Because in times of flare-ups, I'm like, what's the point in understanding the specific emotion? In any case, it won't help me with the pain now because there is a need for a power process. Again, I'm talking about the onsets and uptakes. So listen, typically speaking, the emotions column can still help you anyway. Even when you're in a power process, you can work with the emotional experience to dial down the intensity. So still do that. Doubt is being crafty again. It's twisting things around and saying, well, if it's emotions and power is a problem, then the emotions are useless. But that's not true. That's false. Use the emotions to dial down the intensity. Use the power to learn about what adjustments you need to make, and use the doubt column to challenge the idea that you can't do this. You can. You can look into the power column experience, and you're going to find out this is not impossible. You can actually do it. Okay? Okay, Sonoma Lena says, could symptoms, mucus production, clearing, coughing, globus sensation from diagnosed vagal neuropathy be a mind-body symptom? Absolutely. Yes. And there's a reason that I say absolutely in the way that I do. By the way, Am Bam Williams, thanks for joining us here in Solitary Daughter. Thanks for joining as well. Do let me know if you have questions. So could those symptoms be a mind-body symptom? The first thing I want to say is that any symptom could be a mind-body symptom. And why is that? Because if the body is capable of doing it physically, and the brain has the ability to control every system in the body, which of course it does. In fact, without the brain, none of those systems function at all. The brain not only has the ability to control it, it does control it. And so could any of these symptoms be mind-body? Absolutely. Now, when you say from diagnosed vagal neuropathy, again, this relates to the question that Susan was asking earlier about diagnosis. They're trying to put a label on why this is happening. I'm not saying that that's wrong, but it's really just descriptive. It's not causal. A lot of times diagnoses are not the cause of things. Let's take PTSD, for example, post-traumatic stress disorder. That's a diagnosis. But does the diagnosis cause the symptoms? No. The diagnosis describes what the collection of symptoms tends to relate to. That's all it says. So I think we can take a lot of diagnoses and not really worry about them so much. But Sonoma Lena, what I'm saying to you is all of those symptoms, the mind is perfectly capable of generating. And in fact, the most likely explanation for almost any symptom is going to end up being mind-body. Now, you do have to get checked out by doctors just to make sure that there's nothing that is life-threatening or threatening to your ability to function. But beyond that, it's going to prove to be mind-body. So I want you to follow up with that. Okay. Rudy asks, do you have a chapter in your book, Waking Up All Sensitized? It's really hard to shake off. It hits me hard in my stomach and the facial. It seems like it's bad when I had a colonoscopy done. Okay. So I don't have a chapter in my book. And they found nothing. So I don't have a chapter in my book that's about any specific symptom. What I have instead is chapters where I list all of these different symptoms so that you can see, oh yeah, my symptom's in there. Now, I know what some people are going to say. They're going to be like, but what if mine wasn't? Well, guess what? I couldn't list every single symptom, because then the whole book would be symptoms. However, I listed a lot. And the ones that I didn't list, they still belong there. Mind-body experience is very varied. And so waking up all sensitized, that sounds to me like a mind-body experience. Absolutely. Any alteration in our experience of how alert we are. Typically speaking, that's a mind-body experience. For people who are just, they're getting bored and suddenly falling asleep, that's a mind-body process. For people who are all revved up and can't get to sleep and have insomnia, that's a mind-body process too. For people who wake up all sensitized, that's a mind-body process too. So the fact that they found nothing, Rudy, that's not surprising to me. Usually they can't find anything. And if they do find something, they're just trying to layer something on to explain something because they can't figure it out otherwise. But this is a mind-body experience. And what you're going to find in my book is not so much things that address those specific symptoms, but it shows you how every symptom is essentially the same thing. They're all the same thing. They're all the mind-body process, and they all can be understood through looking at these 3 columns. Rudy, let me know if that made sense to you. Okay, and Sonoma Lena, let me know if what I answered made sense enough to you. By the way, if we don't get it in today, because we are going to stop shortly, then come back next week, or feel free to come join me in group or take my seminars. I want to talk to you guys about these things and get you answers. Okay. Again, if I missed any questions or comments, please do let me know. I don't want anybody to feel missed. Shelby Geyer says, how do you believe a doctor that tells you you have major anxiety and no tests are needed, especially after all the tests I have had and been to Mayo? Okay, so for one thing, Shelby, if you've had all these tests, the doctor knows that in your chart in all likelihood, or has heard it from you. So they're more likely to think, well, I don't see any reason for more tests. But what you're really asking is, how do I get myself to stop doubting? You want to believe, but you can't yet. So what I would say to you, Shelby, is it makes sense that you might not be able to believe one doctor, but what you can believe is the convergence of evidence. If so many people are telling you the same thing, and it all fits together, and it fits with the science, and it fits with the logic, and it keeps fitting with everything, then eventually I'd ask the opposite question. How can you, and I don't mean it critically, Shelby, but ask your brain this, how can I still believe this nonsense when it's contradicted by everybody? So Shelby, that's what I want. And again, I'm not saying it critically. We're just managing to gather the evidence. And what's really going on is you're having trouble trusting your own brain. You're having trouble trusting the information and how convergent it is. But we can get you there, especially as we keep talking about these things. Okay? We're going to have to enter a speed round here because we're running low on time. But Scotty Stiles has joined us from a different site, so good to see you from that one. Okay, speed round. Karen says, sometimes trying to figure out what is going on or the deeper meaning causes more symptoms because I want to know I'm doing it right more often than not. I'm too tired or mad at having to do that. But guess it's harder not doing the work either way. It's just exhausting. See, I think it's more about honing the work. If you're going to do the work, we need to make it easier. And sometimes taking off from the work is the easier thing to do. To me, Karen, this is about knowing when to apply which. When we're getting exhausted, it means we're doing something in an inefficient way. And I don't mean that critically at all. I just think the columns can help you do it more efficiently. So what I want to do is let's talk that over like in group. Let's talk over where's the exhaustion. And what I'll be able to show you is why you're working too hard and how you can work differently. Okay? Let's go over that more. Oh, but then you had a follow-up. Yeah, 63, and I'm finally knowing I'm my own hero. Thank you, Dan, for being our biggest cheerleaders, nurturing a man you are. Thank you, Karen. That's high praise, and I appreciate it. Your 2 girls are lucky to have such a good dad. Thank you so much. That's very sweet, Karen. But back to your question about it being exhausting. Let's work on that. It doesn't have to be exhausting. That's a sign that we can iron something out. But thank you for the very kind words, Karen. I appreciate it. Russell Crane says, and the reason is because I'm tired of my life in New York City and I'm in a serious relationship with someone from Buenos Aires. I want to try to make my life work here and be together, but I'm scared. Okay, so when fear and desire meet, go towards desire. I'm not saying it's easy, but do it anyway. And remind yourself, you can use the emotions column and the power column to recognize why you're scared and be empathic towards yourself, be nurturing towards yourself, be giving towards yourself. You want this. You're scared, sure, but you're worse off not taking the risk because this is what you actually want. I want you to be kind to yourself. Don't let things like my mom is sick and I should be there guilt you into having bad feelings and not being able to enjoy it. You're allowed to do this. You'll attend to things with your mom in some way or another with financial stability. Let yourself have what you want. Obviously, you need to make ends meet as needed, but let yourself go for what you want. Let's start there, Russell. You're terrified, but that's okay. It doesn't mean not to do it. Here's another thing. Sometimes it can be hard to tell the difference between fear and excitement. I think you're also excited. Okay, Rody Jangles, thanks for joining us here. Kasim, good to see you here, my friend. I was wearing new pants that were tight. That triggered my pelvic pain and my epididymitis. It's now almost full-blown flared up. Okay, so we've talked about this kind of thing. This was like the shoes, Kasim. This is a doubt trigger. What I want to encourage you is that doubt triggers never have to last that long. You freaked out. That's where the flare-up is. Recognize that this is a doubt column freak out. You can calm yourself down and recognize that nothing is happening. You could even potentially just continue to wear the pants, but in this case, I wouldn't. And here's why. Not because there's a problem with the pants, but because they're spiking your doubt. So I want you to instead do the thing that lowers the doubt. You can come back to this doubt column trigger and master it later, but it was too strong this time. So back up, be kind to yourself, and give yourself a break on this. Don't work that out. This is like what I was saying to Karen. This would be a way of working too hard when I want you to work less hard. Okay? But then Kasim said, this is accompanied by chills and fever-like symptoms. I've had this many times over the last 6 years. Going to the urologist, they put me on antibiotics because they think there's a bacterial infection, that the bacterial infection was dormant and it was awoken. Initially, oh, I see. Then you say, is this possible to be a dormant infection or there is an actual structural issue with the manberries? That's a funny phrase. Blood work and urine samples show no infection present. No, the idea of a dormant infection, this is the kind of thing that doctors seem to say that suggests to me that they're way off base. They're just trying to describe something because they just are clueless, unfortunately. So, Kasim, this is a doubt trigger. It freaks you out. It caused a lot of symptoms. And by the way, symptoms can include a fever and chills. You can get really freaked out by this. And the fact that it's happening in such a vulnerable area related to your manhood, that speaks to the fact that there's just high stakes right now. You're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. Give yourself a break from it. Recognize that you are freaked out, that you haven't had people to guide you in this way, and that's been hard for you. Okay? But you are going to be fine, and you're going to be fine soon. So let's go from there. Patty Martin says, I agree with you, Karen. Thanks, Patty. What a wonderful person Dan is. His girls are so fortunate to have him. It's weird. I'm not blushing. I probably should be. But I appreciate the kind words, Karen and Patty. Thank you so much. And I'm lucky to have my daughters. Okay, Susan Sereno says, your explanation is extremely helpful. It makes a lot of sense. I hope this helps my subconscious tonight while I sleep. LOL, it helps. Excellent. Well, the fact is these diagnoses are to describe symptoms, not the other way around. Okay. Oh, I'm getting more praise. Thank you, guys. Susan says, Patty, you were so right about Dan and his girls being so fortunate having him as their father. Thank you so much, Susan. A lot of us did not have the parenting that we needed, so it's very gratifying for me to hear that. Okay, Hillel says, I'm not talking about low-level constant, but rather mid-pain of onsets that come with emotional heaviness. Yes, severity of symptoms can vary from very mild to middle to severe, but it's not about the severity. It's about which column describes what's happening. Okay, we'll keep at that. Dorisa says, even though I am knowledgeable about doubt, my doubt happens often. I had cataract surgery for both eyes, so I stopped taking my supplement, and then my medication had to be stopped. After the surgeries, I felt great, so I wanted to wait until the next blood test. However, now my doubt is going up. Especially digestively, I feel better, but my ankle discomfort is now up. So what thoughts can I use to know that my disease is being reversed? Well, the first thing I want to say is doubt is common in everybody. When we had that eclipse back in April, and I was in the line where you could see it fully, I said to myself, a lot of people are going to have eye symptoms after this eclipse. And then hilariously, I don't know how hilarious it was, but it was interesting nonetheless. I had eye symptoms myself, even though I told myself it was coming. So, Teresa, no shame in having doubt. We all do. I want you to recognize it. Now, you ask, so what thoughts can I use to know my disease is being reversed? Well, first of all, the fact that this happened after a trigger is a sign that nothing bad is happening. There's a reason for it. Whenever we have a reason for things, we can put things aside more easily. That's the first thing that I will say. Secondly, you've been making all this progress all along. What's going to reverse that? The way I think about it is if you're working on mind-body experience, you're going to be moving forward positively. Teresa, I want to give a better answer, but we're running super low on time because I'm way over. So ask this question again next week if you have to. When I say if you have to, what I mean, if you didn't get the answer you wanted entirely, ask it again. Let's talk more about it. There is idiopathic neuropathy in 50% of cases, is what I'm told. That sounds like the kind of bullshit doctors say when they don't know jack shit. Sorry, but I'm just going to say it. Like, who's saying that? Unless it's listen, if Howard Schubiner says that to you, okay, I'll listen to him. But doctors who aren't mind-body informed, that's like listening to 4-year-olds about a physics problem. They don't know anything. Now, doesn't matter what I think, but I want you to take that as a possible way that you could respond to this. I'm going to have to finish up on these 2 questions. Rudy says, well said. I thank you for the support. Beatrice says, one doctor suggested peroneal nerves, top of feet, on top of bone spurs, maybe causing burning. Doesn't that sound like a bunch of crap? I mean, Beatrice, I hope that does sound like crap to you. These doctors don't know anything. And I see you said, I'll write to you on the site. For my group members, there's a community website where they can post questions and I write written responses. That's another advantage of coming to the groups. Okay. So let's keep going with that. Hillel, this is going to have to be super fast. Follow up, I see, but because for me, the emotions and power columns are, I think, combined, there's almost always power work that needs to be done, which again is discouraging for me to do the work at a time of a flare up because it won't help to finish the pain now. Not true. That's doubt messing with you. Okay. I'm going to have to get to the rest later. Send it to me in an email if you need to, but we're way over time. The main thing I want to say is when the concept of power comes up, doubt pounces on it because it knows you're worried about that. You can still use the emotions column. You don't have to solve things in the power column. That is doubt messing with you. Okay. Guys, thank you so much. I look forward to being here with you same time next week and the week after that, as well as the week after that. But in 3 weeks, it's the book launch. So I'm going to be talking about that in the coming weeks, and I'm really excited to share all of that with you, hear what you guys think about the book and the things that I say in it. There's a lot. I know you know that there's a lot of work that went into it, a lot of thought in how it was conceived and brought together, but I can't wait to hear what you think. Okay, guys, thanks so much. Great Q&A as always. Let's keep it up. Keep your questions coming. I'll keep the answers coming. Okay? Thanks so much. Great spending time with you, and I will see you next week.